The three stories you're about to hear are based on true facts about the life of three aboriginal leaders who have influenced Canadian history.
Hi, I'm Freda. I'm 69 years old and I grew up in a BC's old Masset village in a Haida community. I would lie if I said that I had a loving childhood. When my birth mother sold me for a bottle of beer, I was less than 1 year old. The buyer didn't share my blood, but I would still call him grandfather. Most of my memories of that time were me being sexually abused by men in my extended family. Couple of years later, my grandfather went to jail and I was sent to a residential school for people like me. I mean, Aboriginal people. It was like hell on earth. The other kids and I were treated like dogs and sexual objects. I remember falling in love with a boy. He was the most respectful and kind person that I ever met, actually the only one. He died from tuberculosis. One day, a man came and adopted me. At first, I thought it was a good thing because it meant that I would get out of this hellhole. Unfortunately, he was not better than anyone before. The drinking started when I had to carry his child. And telling you my story today makes me realize that I've been raped my entire life. As you probably know, Freda was sexually abused by multiple men in her extended family. Many other Aboriginal people live the same thing as Anne in Canada's First Nation, Métis, and Inuit communities. For almost 120 years, a number of children were sexually and physically abused by the staff of church residential school, which created a circle of childhood sexual violation from one generation to the next because later on, the victim became abusers too. Freda Enns agreed to the Canadian press to tell them about her story and to be identified to stand up and raise awareness about the sexual abuse in Aboriginal community. Freda quote, "One of the things we lack in this country is an understanding of the magnitude of the problem and we need to look at better ways of gathering data." 80% to 90% victims suffer from substance abuse and addiction because they need to numb their emotional pain and to forget their past.
My name is Sheila Watt Cloutier. I was born in a small Inuit community of Nunavik in northern Quebec in 1953. For the first 10 years of my life, I was raised by my grandmother. My grandfather, William Watt, an employee of the Hudson Bay Company, left us when he was transferred by the company. At the age of 10, I was chosen by the federal government to participate in an educational program in southern Canada because I was an excellent student. I experienced a traumatic arrival in a white family, in an isolated village in Nova Scotia. Child in a foreign place, I missed my house, my family, and my culture. I persevered and learned English, but this was to the detriment of Inuit culture and the Inuktitut language, and I quickly started to question my own identity. When I turned 12, government officials moved me to Churchill, Manitoba, a residential school. This school advocated gender-specific vocational education. Girls learned cooking, housework, and sewing, while boys learned about welding, mechanics, and carpentry. As I grew up, I felt more and more uprooted and isolated, and my school results suffered. My grades went down, and even a government advisor dissuaded me from pursuing my dream of joining a medical school. At the age of 18, disappointed and homesick, I returned to my hometown where I found a community hurt and bruised by the brutal social evolution that followed the disappearance of ancestral practices and traditional way of life. On my return around 1970, I worked as a performer at a local hospital for 4 years. I appreciated this role, which allowed me to refamiliarize myself with Inuktitut and brought me back to my identity as an Inuit woman. At that time in the hospitals, the indigenous community was a victim of chronic health problems. Family violence and drug and alcohol addiction, soaring respiratory diseases, skin infections, gastrointestinal diseases, and the alarming proliferation of viral and bacterial infections. These problems were aggravated by poverty and the loss of ancestral cultural landmarks that made up the identity of the Inuit before the beginning of trade with Europeans.
Hi, I'm Katie. You may know me as the gold medalist of the 400 meter sprint in the 2000 Olympic Games. I won lots of medals, everybody knows it, but only few people knows what I've been through. My road to success wasn't easy. The first time I realized my race was an issue, I was in primary school. At that time I didn't know. I didn't realize what I was victim of. Only thing I knew is that I was treated differently. But now I know. I know exactly what discrimination is. My passion for running started at a very young age. I would run with my friends and siblings at the age of 5. Then came school athletics competition. I would always win first place, but sadly, I never received a trophy. It was the non-aboriginal kids that would receive a trophy even with only a second place. Then I started to run with a real team. I had to deal with discrimination my whole career, even when it came within my own team. But I will never let that stuff get to me because I knew I had to stay focused. Then came my adult life. I ran for all the Australians, but sadly I will still receive 8 emails from them. Also, at one time, I decided to carry both Australian and Aboriginal flags. That led to a lot of critics, but I decided to do it for a second time, because that's what I'm proud of. Katie Freeman is not the only Aboriginal athlete who suffered from discrimination. Many other athletes had to go through a lot of things to become who they are now. After her career, Katie Freeman decided to create her own foundation which supports more than 6,000 kids each year in Palm Island and an Aboriginal community in the Northern Territory. Her goal is to close the gap in Indigenous education.
Just maybe I'll come